purchased an overground tank in England second-hand in situ. We got it home. It was 2 weeks of hard labour taking it down and getting it, transporting it home. So between planning permission and archaeologist survey, digging the site, so the plan is then to have this in situ for the autumn of this year to take in slurry.
And what size tank did you purchase, Kevin?
It was 400,000 gallons with a roof on, 65 feet in diameter and 20 foot height, a fine chunk of a tank.
Once we enter June, the majority of agronomic tasks are completed on crops, which allows some time to reflect on the work so far and if the actions next time could be improved further. Poor crop growth as a result of wet soils and machinery compaction is evident in spring barley, and also from the application of organic manures. You're listening to the latest episode of the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. We'd really appreciate it if you could listen, follow, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. The use of organic manures is very difficult this year due to the very late spring, with soils which were barely fit for planting. However, many farmers successfully managed to incorporate organic manures into their tillage systems, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Kevin O'Donnell, who is farming on the Edge of Gore in County Kilkenny. Kevin is an enthusiastic user of organic manures and joins me today to discuss his future plans to utilise more manures for the future. Kevin, as I said, you're farming close to Gore in County Kilkenny. You might give me a little bit of a brief outline of your farming system.
I've been farming here for the last 35, 40 years, and we have a mix of tillage, sheep and horses. The tillage system is a mix of winter, spring. We've been min-tilling since 00, so coming up to 25 years now. And we have a good number of ewes at the moment, and they seem to be fitting in with the sheep or with the tillage system quite nicely. And then we do a few horses as well. Being a tillage farmer, we have quieter times of the year, and it allows us to tackle into training a few horses.
All right, very good. And when you say you have a couple of sons or daughters who are part of the farming operation?
Well, my wife, myself, and we have 5 children, and they've all been reared farming and horses, and they all do what they're comfortable doing, which some of them, the boys, mostly it's the race horses, the girls, show jumping, eventing, and so they enjoy it and they knock a bit of fun out of it.
And anyone helping you driving a few tractors and doing a bit of farming in the background, or actually turning up the ewes, but probably the more difficult job altogether?
Well, the 2 boys have, my second son has just finished ag science up in UCD, and Philip also finished it a few years ago. He has an off-farm job. He went on and did tax, and he's a qualified tax consultant now. But that doesn't stop them getting involved in the farm when we get a bit busy, and by golly, I'm glad to have them.
Right. Always great to have a bit of help. And I suppose with that in mind, it has been probably a very difficult year over the last, probably 10 or 12 months nearly. But when I was down visiting your farm there a couple of weeks ago, you still managed to get quite a bit of winter crops into the ground, and they were looking reasonably well. What's your assessment, Kevin, of how those winter crops are looking at this stage of the year?
Well, the first crop we grew last autumn was rye, and hopefully we can keep this crop growing. The millers aren't wild about it, but it's a lovely start to the sowing season. You can get it in there in the middle of September, and it's not that vulnerable to BYDV. It did get a little bit of attack there from slugs, but it seems to have rallied quite respectably. The next crop then we put in was winter barley around the 5th of October, the first real chance we got there in October. Probably would have preferred to sow it a week earlier, but we just didn't get a chance. And these were all into stale seed beds. Now, the winter wheat we sowed, they were all into, basically, the winter wheat went into maize ground and bean ground. And the bean ground was left untouched from harvest. So as soon as the weather window came, we got 2 or 3 dry days, forecast of a reasonable spell. We just cultivated those fields and sowed them directly in. And this gave us a great opportunity to get a nice uniform establishment on the winter wheat. So look, they're looking quite respectable at the moment.
Okay, happy enough. Decent yield potential in all of them, really.
Yeah, no, there's a good coverage. There's a few wet spots or washed out spots, if you like. But no, in general, there's a good stand, yeah.
Sure. And then you had to fill in a little bit in terms of spring cropping afterwards. How are most of those looking, do you think?
Yeah, well, spring cropping, we don't have any spring cereals. We have spring beans, and then we have a field of maize. And then with the sheep in mind, then we have one field for a kale, a red start for the lambs to be weaned onto. So the beans were maybe a month or 6 weeks too late, or later than I would have liked, but they're in, they're up, and they're growing. The cover crop is coming on nicely, and the maize is planted.
During our visit last couple of weeks, Kevin, we talked a good bit about organic manures, and you mentioned the fact that you've used quite a bit of organic manures in the past. You might just outline why you have, I suppose, a preference maybe of using some organic manures or maybe a lot of organic manures on your farm, and what sort of quantities you're aiming for most years.
Well, I suppose it started off with me grazing cover crops with the O's. And one year I had a surplus of cover crops, and I cultivated the cover crop into the ground. Well, it was like, I don't know what, to the ground. It just turned that field inside out. And coming from a non-cattle background, we don't have any access to farmyard or to slurry. We have a certain amount of farmyard manure from the horses, all right, but would be much more to cover 15 or 20 acres each year. And so to see what difference even the grazing cover crops on the ground, it just injected that extra little bit of life back into the ground for the crops the following year. So it evolved then. I've been speaking to a pig farmer there for the last number of years about taking slurry and the pros and the cons and maps and everything. And we went further down the line then. We talked about importing slurry and getting a facility to take in the slurry. And we looked at different options of costings. And I suppose the quickest one was a nurse tank and feeding it out with an umbilical. And actually that happened this year. Our local pig man was in such a pain with full tanks. He volunteered to bring slurry and put it on my bean ground, maize ground, and cover crop ground. And so it was a fabulous way of getting nutrition into the ground, and done with a nurse tank and an umbilical system. And it's amazing how quick they can spread, 100, 120 acres with that system, and with very little trafficking on the ground.
And when you say, Kevin, very quickly, you spread quite a large quantity within 2 or 3 days, I think you mentioned.
Well, 640,000 gallons in 2 days.
Holy moly, right. So you covered most of the ground that you have then. Did you put any of that, it's an umbilical cord system, did you chance putting any of that onto the growing crops of wheat or barley or rye?
It was too late in the year.
Okay.
And even if it was earlier in the year, I don't think my ground was dry enough to take the punishment of the extra driving. We're on 30-metre tram lines, so I don't think it would be practical at this moment in time, unless you get a quite dry spring or a drier spring. I don't think we would have tackled it.
And it sounds like you brought an awful lot of material onto the farm. A lot of people, my viewers, might be picking up and thinking, Jesus, that's an awful lot of stuff. Did you have a nutrient management plan completed beforehand to know that you could actually take that amount in and still have a capacity to take in some or to use some chemical fertilizer as well?
Yeah, well, to go back a step, we already had planning permission in for an overground slurry store. We went back and did that 12 months previous.
Okay.
And so in order to do that, we had to have our nutrient management plan done. And I knew what we were allowed to bring in, thanks to my agricultural advisor. And so, yes, we had a reasonable quota of slurry, if you like, to bring in. We went about, we purchased an overground tank in England second-hand in situ. And in hindsight, it was quite daft. But anyway.
But you have it home anyway. Definitely seen it there anyway, so you have it home.
Oh, we got it home. It was 2 weeks of hard labour taking it down and transporting it home. And so between planning permission and archaeologist survey, digging the site, it ended up we weren't finished all of that until last September, and the weather ran out at that stage. So we didn't proceed with building it over the winter. We said we'd leave it on for the longer days, and so we're just about going about that now. And so the plan is then to have this in situ for the autumn of this year to take in slurry.
And what size tank did you purchase, Kevin?
It was 400,000 gallons with a roof on, diameter 50 or 65 feet in diameter and 20-foot height with a roof.
Okay, so it's pretty sizable then, really. It's a big tank.
A fine chunk of a tank.
In terms of your calculations for the total slurry that you can hold in that, it's more than likely pig slurry, will it be? Is that enough to cover all of your ground or a proportion of your ground every year?
It wouldn't. I suppose twice. I'd want 2 fills of it to do all of my needs. But I said we'll creep before we can run, and so we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Well, with having a mix of grassland and tillage, we probably have a few different options of timing. If I put out slurry after hay crops and things like that, it gives me a bit of flexibility. I suppose with crops, with the tillage, you're probably focusing on March and April the whole way through. Maybe cover crops and grassland, then you're probably a little bit more flexible on it.
And in terms of it's a big store. There's a lot of slurry to go in there. Have you, I suppose, to a degree, cemented that relationship with your pig farmer? I presume you're getting from the pig farmer, in the sense that you are reasonably confident that you're going to get the supply of slurry every year on one side of it, but also the quality of slurry on the other side of it.
It's a very grey area. I don't have I have nothing in writing. As soon as I took the fertilizer or the slurry from him this spring, we registered that with the department. So that's done with, and they know I have maps to match it. So there's no problem there. So I presume it'll build, the goodwill will build in time. From the point of view of getting a contract and getting a grant or a contract to take the slurry, to avail of a grant for these towers and slurry storage, I don't know how they're fixed. I suppose I'm in a position that I don't need a contract, so I'm probably a bit of more of a free agent, point of view of taking in slurry.
And you'd be happy enough to take in slurry from different, whether it's a pig farmer or maybe a dairy farmer, or maybe from a digestion unit or something like that. You're agnostic enough, are you, in terms of what you can take in? You have the storage now.
Yeah, I'm told there's less nitrogen in the digestate, and probably higher in K. So it might just work that way, that the digestate might work at a different time of the year. I have to do my homework on it and see what's more suitable.
You're happy enough to be flexible, that you will consider all options, I suppose. Correct.
Yeah. They seem to think that we should be charging gate fees for taking in the slurry. because we are providing a service. And from that point of view, maybe I'm playing the game a little bit and trying to get my spreading subsidised to some extent by making a gate fee for some of it.
With that in mind, you've done some sort of calculations, financial calculations in the background in terms of the cost of the tank and potentially P's and K's and nitrogen coming through the door, that there's going to be a value to you. In your mind, roughly speaking, how many years do you think it will take before you are square or kind of pay off the tank in itself, in terms of that capital investment?
Roughly, I was estimating finished. The tank is standing me probably 40,000 in situ, ready to go. And my savings on fertilizer after the cost of spreading the slurry could be in the region of 8,000 to 10,000 a year on 450 acres. And so it will be a 4-year payback.
Okay.
That's taking no gate fees. It's okay. But the bigger picture is I feel I'll be growing better crops, healthier crops, and then the environmental impact of that also.
Yes.
That it's a circular environmental economy, if you like.
Just thinking, Kevin, around the your farm in total, often farms are, in terms of taking in organic manure, are limited by the amount of phosphate in their soil. So in other words, if you have high levels of phosphate, you're limited on the amount of organic manures, or maybe excluded from taking in organic manures. Where is your farm in general, and is P the big limiter, do you think, going forward for your farm in terms of taking in organic manures?
I'd imagine if I have 5 years of slurry importation, I won't be any. I will wind down. I won't be any big pressure to keep importing. So if my P's and K's are sufficient, I'll be able to take basically a holiday from artificial and organic to some extent. So it'll be, soil samples will tell me where to go, really.
So you're, as you're thinking about it, you're kind of in a bit of a building phase and using those organic manures to try and build some of the background quantities there to kind of bring you up to that.
Our P's and K's wouldn't be, coming from totally artificial P and K's, and taking off good big crops of straw. The P's and K's, and even quite often the K's. I will probably see myself just spreading muriate of potash in a few years' time, where we're taking a lot of straw off.
Sure.
So the soil samples will tell us what we'll have to do.
Yeah, where are you going to go on that? Okay, look, it's a great news story in terms of fair dues to you. There's a good bit of work in taking down that tank and putting it back up again. There's a lot of work in that, but obviously it's going to pay off, I think, towards the end of it. I just wanted to kind of touch base with you. When we were chatting last, one of your sons had a horse that was racing, I think, in a bumper or point to point or somewhere. How did he get on?
Oh, yes. Philip was riding one of my horses that we train here on the farm down in Wexford last Wednesday, and he was watching his weight to ride it. So yes, the horse ran well. Came up against one of J.P. McManus's. Lovely Hurling was its name, and we came second to him.
Very good.
50-1. So
excellent. Even better again.
Yeah.
We might have to touch base with you more regularly, Kevin, and see if we can get a few tips around the horses as well along the way.
Well, that's the Mugs game anyway.
Listen,
you never see a poor bookmaker.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and best of luck for the year coming up. You're certainly down with you. You have some lovely looking crops down there, and you really do have a beautiful farm as well. So thanks very much again.
Very good, Michael. Thank you indeed.
So that's it for this week. And as usual, if you enjoyed the podcast, then recommend it to a friend or colleague. And as always, rate, review, and follow on Apple or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back next week with more tillage news and advice.